Hello everybody and welcome back to Insider's Guide. Today we're finishing our discussion of what is arguably the USA's most iconic ski area, Palisades, Tahoe. With Palisades there's a lot to talk about, so this Insider's Guide is split into 5 parts. In this part, we'll cover everything remaining, including all of the backside runs. If you haven't already, go check out part A to get some great context to the mountain. A huge thank you to Ski TMB for helping us with research and footage of Silverado. If you like what you see, he's got so much more good stuff at the link in the description. So with that, let's continue in Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Palisades, Tahoe. We'll begin by discussing the most popular intermediate terrain pod on the entire mountain, Shirley Lake. It's popular for a reason, as if you're an intermediate, this is the best area on the mountain to spend time in. However, there's a reason that the Palisades side isn't known for its intermediate terrain. I'm not particularly fond of Shirley Lake because I honestly think it's the worst, best intermediate pod in the Lake Tahoe region. Runs here barely maintain their pitch, are extremely quick, and have flat runouts. In addition, the Shirley pod is just plain short, clocking it at a paltry 700 vertical feet. It often feels like you reach the bottom before you even know it. I personally only use Shirley as a means of transit between mountain areas and try to avoid it as much as I can. Lines here can really build up with its sheer popularity and because it's the main way out of this backside area. It can become a brutal choke point. If you do end up at Shirley Lake during these times, I'd recommend heading over to the Solitude lift as a means of egress from the backside. Solitude doesn't always spin, but when it does, as the name suggests, it stays pretty empty. The catwalk to get there is rather flat, but it might be worth it if the Shirley line gets really out of hand. Alright, Shirley Lake rant over, let's talk about the actual runs here. With a few exceptions, the Shirley runs get progressively easier from lookers right to left, where Shirley Bowl is the steepest run and is usually ungroomed. While the rest of the Shirley Blues are your average AI-generated tree-defined groomers, Shirley Bowl is a true bowl. As such, it's probably my favorite of the traditional Shirley runs here. It's especially fun in the spring when people start to make some really nice and sustained snake or wiggle runs in this area. The rest of the runs from Tomlinson's to Marillacs are on rotational grooming. As mentioned above, these get progressively easier as you get closer to Marillacs. Rooters is a bit more challenging than the other blues as it's ungroomed and filters down to Solitude only. I actually do like the contrast between Shirley and Solitude. The former offers a lot more traditional intermediate groomers, whilst the latter feels more untamed and remote. As mentioned above, Solitude rarely gets lines and is a nice place to get away from the crowds. Like Shirley, Solitude also suffers from a short vertical drop, but that does mean that the admittedly slow ride up isn't too time consuming. Freeway here is usually groomed, but is the sole exception. Kind of like Broken Arrow, this is a part of the mountain that I think is best to get lost in and explore for yourself. It's not mind-blowing, but there are some fun spots to play around in after some adventuring. Let's jump back over to Shirley Bowl, from which you can follow the traverse tracks going skiers left and stay as high as possible in order to reach this little rock pile area. Now, I recently learned from a patrol map that this part of the trail map is slightly inaccurate. Little Rock Pile actually refers to the Shirley Chutes area, which we'll talk about shortly. Arete is actually where Little Rock Pile is on the map, and Rock Pile is where Arete is on the map, so everything on the map is further lookers right than it is in real life. You can only access Little Rock Pile and Arete from that Shirley traverse via some slight sidestepping. As mentioned earlier, Little Rock Pile is home to the Shirley Chutes, a series of 4 Squallywood level lines. What's great about these Shirley Chutes is that they can be skied in suboptimal conditions when other lines are completely undone. They are easily my favorite runs in the Shirley pod, and I will almost always hit them as a stop along the way to Granite Chief. The easiest chutes here are Early Shirley and Surly Shirley, 2 very fun and steep straight lines. Squirrely Shirley is a bit more technical, but will become more accessible when the snow base builds. Burly Shirley is by far the most challenging of the 4, as it requires a combination of billy goating and some huge drops. While snowpack dependent, usually at least Early Shirley is skiable for the majority of the season. Arete is located right behind the Shirley Chutes and can occasionally require some mini straight lines. Just beyond the bottom terminal of the Shirley Lake lift is our next talking point, the Granite Chief Triple. Granite Chief was a pod that I was initially not too crazy about, but the more I've skied it, the more I appreciate it. For starters, the favorable elevation and sun aspect preserved the snow well. Even though Granite Chief Peak is the highest area within the Palisades side boundary, the terrain here is standout because it's mostly gladed, a stark contrast to almost all of the rest of Palisades. Granite Chief also offers a ton of variety for advanced and expert riders. There are so many nooks and crannies here that take a bit of work to find but offer some of the best skiing and riding at the entire resort. The only real downside is the slow ride up, but plenty will make an argument that it adds to the character that the zone is known for. Alright, let's discuss the terrain itself. A quick reminder, you can access all of the runs from main backside to Little Rock Pile via the backside road from Emigrant, as we discussed in Part D. We'll first talk about the runs lookers left of the lift, and then move on to the terrain lookers right of the lift. To access these first 4 runs from the lift, you'll have to take the American River Traverse, a groomed road. Overall, it moves along just fine, but you might have to do some sidestepping to reach the various drop-ins. High Voltage and Paradise Alley are the 2 runs directly next to the lift. They're steep and form some huge moguls. There is usually a bit of a drop-in from the ridge, which reaches its biggest point around Crook's Gulch. Main Backside and Crook's Gulch are the 2 widest runs in the Granite Chief pod, and while Crook's Gulch is always ungroomed, Main Backside is groomed pretty consistently these days. While Main Backside does flatten out a good bit towards the bottom, the initial pitch makes up for it, and is one of the couple cruises at Palisades that I would say are truly good to uncork it and fly down. This is also obviously the easiest way down the Granite Chief pod. Just beyond Main Backside are Magoo's and Carnell's, 2 very steep and narrow mogul runs that are often overlooked due to being less prominent than the other runs in the pod. I do like Carnell's a bit more because it's even more hidden and you get really close to some awesome looking rocks on the skier's right. Beyond those 2, the American River Traverse meets up with the backside trail from Emigrant and becomes the attic if you continue to traverse. This part of the ridge becomes more of a single track than a groomed road and does require some sidestepping in spots. Corkscrew is the first run you reach, and it's arguably my favorite marked run lappable via Granite Chief. This area is much steeper than all of the other marked single blacks here. Corkscrew offers a ton of technical variety, a steep choke, and several unique paths down. I would recommend watching a video of this run if it's your first time. There's a ton of exposure here, and ending up in the wrong spot could really ruin your day. Once things begin flattening out towards the bottom, you can either continue down Corkscrew proper and merge onto the backside exit trail, or cut skiers left into a very tight section of trees known as Black Forest. I'm mixed about this area, because while it can be home to some untouched snow, the trees here are almost too tight to get into a good rhythm. It's definitely a fun area to explore, but I usually opt to continue down Corkscrew. Backside exit is not exactly your typical road, and actually offers a few cliffs and mild straight lines adjacent to the main path. Contrary to the map, it's not directly parallel to Bottleneck, but rather hugs the contours to wrap around the bottom of Corkscrew and end at Shirley Lake, while Bottleneck itself runs in a straight line to the bottom of Granite Chief. Moving a bit further down the attic, Break It Out is another standout run in this part of the Granite Chief pod. Like Corkscrew, it offers a ton of variety and even some drops and straight lines in leaner snow conditions. If you go about a quarter of the way down Break It Out and cut skiers left, you'll access an alternative entrance into Corkscrew that starts a bit further down. This will usually be open even when the main entrance isn't, and while it's not as technical, it's just about as steep. Rockpile is the next run up, and while it's not as unique as the aforementioned areas, it's a much wider area that's fun to explore. We already talked about everything else here, which are accessible via both the attic and Shirley Bowl. Over on the other side of the lift, the Granite Chief lift line itself is home to a ton of excellent small and medium cliffs and features. This area is a great place for working on drops, and in general, they're gnarlier the closer to the top you are. The most famous of these is known as Diving Board, which is the cliff band right underneath the top of the chair. Depending on where you drop in, airs here can vary between 15 and 40 feet. Further to the looker's right is Hidden Bowl, which is a steep, wide open area. Note that this whole zone gets some pretty strong sun exposure, so it's really best in the spring when it's nice and soft. There is a ridiculous amount of terrain below Hidden Bowl. It's heavily varied, consisting of cliffs and chutes to trees and meadows. It's another one of those that's better for you to explore than for me to try to describe. There are practically zero signs or indicators as to where you are, so it'll take several laps to get familiar with the zone. I honestly only ski this zone after a lap down Granite Chief Peak, which is our next talking point. Granite Chief Peak is simply legendary. It's home to easily the coolest terrain in the pod. The hike takes around 15 to 30 minutes depending on your pace. For skiers, this is the one hike at Palisades Tahoe that I'd recommend a backpack to attach your skis to, although it's not strictly necessary. The hike is steep, but overall not as bad as it might appear from the chairlift. About 2/3 of the way up the hike, you'll come to a false summit that is home to a few lines. The most notable one is known as Patrol Chute, which is a super gnarly but very aesthetic straight line through the rocks. A bit beyond Patrol Chute are Buttress and Summit Chute, which are steep but more traditional chutes. These are by far the easiest lines off the peak. Once you reach the summit, the most prominent line you'll see is Direct Chute. If I could recommend one line for you to ski off the peak, it's this one. It's an absolutely beautiful couloir that runs straight down the heart of the zone. The main entrance can be corniced and very narrow, but it does open up about halfway down. There's an alternative skier's right entrance into Direct Chute that's still very steep, but more forgiving than the main entrance. Beyond Direct Chute is Christmas Tree Chute, an ultra steep and ridiculously narrow shot that is most often straight-lined. If you do plan to point it down either Christmas Tree Chute or Direct Chute, you'll need to cut hard skier's right to avoid going into the trees at uncontrollable speeds. Past Christmas Tree Chute, the zone opens up a good bit and there are broader chutes you can do. There are also a handful of large drops and narrow straight lines sprinkled about, but I'll leave these for you to explore. The backside of Granite Chief Peak is home to some of the most popular backcountry options at Palisades, Tahoe. Do not venture out here unless you really know what you're doing though, since this area is extremely avalanche prone. Finally, although this is rarely open, there is an additional way down from the peak known as Smoothies. What makes Smoothies unique is that it's the only run off Granite Chief Peak that filters down to the Silverado pod. It's rarely open because it requires both the peak and Silverado to be open, and because of wet slide dangers due to sun exposure. If you want the best chance to ski it, it's most frequently open in the spring and only for the first few hours of the morning. It is a cool little experience that's worth doing once if it's open during your visit, but I'd honestly only recommend it to people comfortable with backcountry style terrain. Speaking of Silverado, it's about high time we discussed that part of the mountain. At least historically, Silverado has always been the least reliable pod to open at Palisades due to its lower elevation and low priority for mountain ops relative to other pods. While it still holds this title, at least as of the last few seasons, it has been opened by, at the latest, February. Silverado is an absolutely enormous area, so we're going to stick mostly just to what's shown and labeled on the map here. The pod is accessed through a series of 8 gates that all offer very different terrain. We'll start with 7 and 8 and work down to 1, but I'll say up front that the easiest ways down Silverado are via Land Bridge and the Oregon Trail. Land Bridge, accessed directly from Gate 7, is often groomed and serves as a great way to scope out the off-piste that flows into it. Oregon Trail is a glorified traverse, and while it does allow you to scope out the looker's right terrain of Silverado, I wouldn't really recommend it for an actually enjoyable route down. Now, Gate 8 is one of the more infrequently opened gates in the zone. The terrain here is milder but also more remote. The two marked runs are Stump Farm and Farside, which are two very lightly graded areas. Gate 7 is pretty much just for Land Bridge, so over to Gate 6 we go. Off Gate 6 you get dropped into Hanging Gardens, which is where the Silverado terrain starts to show its true colors. While Hanging Gardens itself is deceptively benign, the area directly below it, Kathmandu, is very technical, consisting of several chutes and cliff bands. This is a common theme with a lot of the Silverado terrain, and it leads to some pretty blind rollovers. That's all the more reason why I'd recommend a preliminary scoping run down Land Bridge if it's your first time skiing the zone. Gate 5, which filters you into Tram and Bungee Bowls, covers the hardest terrain in the pod. Like the Gate 6 terrain, Tramble is deceivingly mellow, but the terrain below it is absolutely wild, even more so than Gate 6. This is also where the map does a really poor job of depicting the endless features and chutes you can find, but I will do my best to verbally describe it. From Tramble, cut a bit skier's left to access the most prominent feature in the Silverado Canyon, the China Wall. This terrain, located looker's left of the mark Kima's Paw on the map, is gnarly. There are a countless number of chutes, cliffs, and straight lines here. Proper route scoping here is critical. Ending up in the wrong spot can be fatal. Gate 4 accesses Bailey's Cirque, which is home to similarly extreme terrain. Bailey's Cirque itself is very wide open and lightly graded towards the bottom. If you continue straight down, you'll reach the Medusa area. Similar to Kathmandu, it's home to several chutes and cliff bands and offers a ton of variety. From the top of Gate 4, if you cut skiers right towards this rocky outcropping, you'll reach the Ludwig's Castle area, home to some very exposed lines. From Bailey's Cirque or Ludwig's Castle, cut skiers right to reach Kima's Paw. You can access the China Wall terrain if you continue to head further skiers right. Kima's Paw itself is a very fun, steep chute that pretty much always mandates a straight line. The most prominent unnamed run here is Mr. Toad's Chute, which is located just skiers left of Kima's Paw. Mr. Toad's is an ultra-narrow and aesthetic couloir that's just barely wide enough to make jump turns in. Just adjacent to Mr. Toad's is an ultra-gnarly area home to some of the most insane lines in all of Silverado. The most notable line is called Frogs and Toads, which is a very gnarly straight line with 2 paths down. Gate 3 accesses Beaver Bowl, which is another wide, generally mellow bowl area located just lookers right of Bailey's Cirque. If you continue straight down Beaver Bowl, you'll reach the lookers right side of the Medusa area. If you hang a bit more skiers left, you'll reach these 3 runs: Jake's, Billy's, and Fatal Attraction. These are 3 steep and rocky chutes and are much harder than their single black rating would imply. That goes for pretty much all of the pod, honestly. From the bottom of any of these chutes, you can cut skiers left to access Little Yosemite, which is a gnarly cliff area. However, due to the low elevation, the snow quality can start to get a bit more variable down here. The final 2 gates both access Trail 90, which is one of the more mellow ways down Silverado. This is another route to get to the top of these 3 chutes we just discussed. No matter which line you take in Silverado, you will end up on either Land Bridge or the Oregon Trail, which will bring you to the bottom of the lift. Alright, that about wraps it up for the Palisades side. If you haven't already, go check out parts A through D to hear about the rest of Palisades. Or go check out another episode of Insider's Guide all about other fine resorts around the world. Another huge thanks to Ski TMB for helping us with research and footage of Broken Arrow and Silverado. If you like what you see, he's got so much more good stuff at the link in the description. As always, please leave any questions down below. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please consider subscribing to help support this stream. Thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.